sustainable city, which includes impactful citywide climate action, mitigation and adaptation, consistent with global agreements and scientific evidence, and ecologically and socially sustainable economy. Our vision for the city of Des Moines is to have it be the leading, resilient, healthy, vibrant, equitable, and welcoming community in the state of Iowa. So we're going to start out today with, I'm going to give just a short synopsis of the agenda. We're going to have David present, followed by questions and a discussion on where we go for what we do to ensure the adoption. Then we're going to have updates on benchmarking and the 100% renewable resolution. And finally, announcements about things happening and coming up. So I'm going to ask you to mute so we can hear David's presentation. If you have questions and would like to put them in the chat, that'd be great. To introduce David, I would like to, we did a bit of an introduction in our invite, but I yesterday listened to Connie Mutel. She's an ecologist and science writer from University of Iowa, who's written, I think, 15 books on everything, including climate change. And she was on the Talk of Iowa yesterday, and she commented on the derecho storm. She lives on 16 acres of woodland off of Iowa City. And she said she's mourning the death of her trees in that woodland. But she said, I'm also very worried about the tree canopy that was lost in the storm, because that could lead to disease and also death. So she just was really speaking about how our tree canopy has been affected by the storm. And I think that makes it all the more important that we look at and promote an urban forest master plan. There isn't anyone in Des Moines that's as qualified to write and promote a master plan as Mr. David Yan. He's been our forester, our city forester for, I think, 11 years. Before that, he was the city forester for Pittsburgh for 6 years. So I just want to get going. I'm excited to hear your presentation, David, as the rest of us. So take it away.
Thank you, Carolyn. I want to touch base first with Kent, if he'll come off mute. Are you hearing me better now, Kent? I've turned up a dial and I brought my speaker closer. Are you hearing me good?
You're good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
All right. So the first order of business, share screen. And then all right, are you looking at a screen without notes?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. So, are you looking at anything yet?
No.
Oh,
Not
really?
yet. Yeah.
Okay, I've got to do something different. So here's my share. Oh, I probably wasn't doing it right from the beginning.
There you go.
All right, are you looking at notes or not notes?
Notes.
And now you're looking at not notes.
Good deal. There you
I
go.
made it. I feel like going back to, oh, I am on camera. I made it. You can't beat this. I fumbled with this before. All right, folks, glad to be with you today. Now I see one click in the program. Now your pictures are covering my notes. So anyway, I want to tell you that I recognize the great importance that the task force plays as we try to make our city environmentally sustainable. And you're also then, by virtue of that role, you're also considering and very much involved with the vitality of our city. So I appreciate the hearing. I've been with you before. This is double dipping. And what I'm going to do today is in a short 20 minutes, I'm going to lay out for you 25 chapters of the master plan. I've already mentioned to you, some of you in the early going, that the print version, which is still kind of getting the last minute tinkering, every time you turn a page, you're confronted with the left and right page of a chapter. As soon as you turn the page, you're the next 2 pages of the next chapter. So, but online, there's going to be a very robust plan for all to follow. We just felt it important to create a color brochure for certain purposes. All right, so we start every good plan, whether it's a wedding rehearsal or a master plan for the forest, by asking 3 questions. The first of which is, what do we have? And we're blessed to have 49,000 trees of record. We have hundreds of thousands more in forested areas, but these are the ones we've counted. And 91% are in fair to excellent condition. So we're starting from a very good place. Second question is, what do we want? We want to meet a 3% canopy increase goal that was set by the DNR a few years back. It takes us to 2045. We only plant 500 to 700 annually now, and their target is for us to plant 3,800 annually in order to meet that canopy goal. And I think this group probably already understands that percentage canopy is related to an aerial view. If you're looking from a satellite and take out all the square inches or miles that have tree cover, that's your percentage canopy. The second thing we absolutely have to do is restore to the city a cyclical pruning program. It was lost in the 70s and 80s to cutbacks. We've got to get back there to extend our tree service life. And so what do we have? What do we want? How do you get what you want? We've got to increase then our planting budget 5-fold, from 200,000 to 1 million annually. We've got to hire 3 additional 2-person crews for cyclical pruning. So there's a lot of stuff in our master plan. These are kind of the essence of where we need to go. We know what we want to do and how we're going to do it. There's a lot of nuances that are found in the plan beyond these. Chapter 2, stormwater. I know you all understand the concept, so things I know you understand, we're breezing through. We did have a student study 6 neighborhoods in the city and found that, so you're over here, so found that these 2 with low canopy took in 500,000 to 600,000 gallons of stormwater. Downtown and Capitol East with medium canopy took in 700,000 to 800,000, but Beaverdale and Drake, 2.5 to 2.6 million gallons of stormwater rescued. That's 2.6 million gallons that didn't go into the drain, didn't make it into overflow that would overtax our sewage plant, and ultimately didn't get into the streams and rivers. So this is water that got saved for Des Moines and used for good purposes. I pointed out on an earlier presentation that coincidentally or incidentally, you've got 2,400 trees downtown. You've got less than that in both Beaverdale and Drake. The difference being, and this is hammered home then in our big trees chapter, we've got bigger, older trees in those 2 neighborhoods, so they get 2.6 million gallons of storage. Whereas downtown, we've got smaller trees that may not get that much bigger. So that's why the discrepancy there. So I'm going to give you 2 recommendations from each chapter. There's between 4 and 10 recommendations throughout the chapters. Just going to give you a sampling from each. So for stormwater, the author is saying plant more trees over hard surfaces, plant more trees in riparian areas. Our climate change chapter, state climatologists have studied weather patterns extensively. They generally agree on 3 things. Number 1, there's going to be some increase in temperature, mostly in the winter, but also with higher overnight low temperatures. The second thing they agree on is a longer growing season, and the third is an increase in heavy rainfall events. The top two recommendations there, sustain the existing tree cover. This takes you into the older, larger trees concept of the big tree chapters. The second recommendation I'm bringing out is address our tree species selection to accommodate warmer temperatures. Chapter 4, green stormwater infrastructure. And so there was they did a case study of the 6th Avenue corridor, et cetera. Recommendations there, develop tree canopy goals by watershed, maximize the use of trees in watersheds, and determine benchmarks, et cetera. Secondly, plant trees in the areas most in need of stormwater runoff control. Was it coincidental that 2 years ago, Beaverdale and some of those northern neighborhoods had all the flooding, or could trees have helped in that regard? So, you know, put your trees where they're going to do you a whole lot of good in a hurry. Riparian areas. This study group they studied a lot of things, and they came up with a particular study on the 4 Mile Creek. And so you've got these bendway piers up around 4-Way Creek above University Avenue. And they show you some of the plant stock that went in and how the construction went. But their recommendations, survey, you know, start by knowing what you got. Survey and assess the condition of all riparian zones and select water-loving trees of a diverse species. One of your members, Allison Van Pelt, wrote our street trees chapter. There's studies out there that show you got less crash rates when there's a landscape, also less mid-block crashes when you've got trees along the street. Recommendations, strategically plant in high foot traffic and transit areas to create safe spaces. And then secondly, maybe work with DART to utilize trees to create shade and windbreaks for those people. Chapter 7 on wildlife, they kind of laid out there in front of you to mitigate development threats, of which we have numerous, all the way down through community involvement. Recommendations there, identify threats to plants and wildlife. And a lot of this is fleshed out in these chapters. They've got wonderful graphics. They've done study on which snails are at risk and which fish and birds, and it's wonderful. Also cooperate with neighbors to foster implementation of local corridors between habitat so we can keep our wildlife intact. Bee pollinators, we rely on them not only for 30% of our food crops, but they're also a base of biodiversity. And so this horticulture student at ISU, she did a study, looked at our tree inventory, find we have oak trees in every single one of our neighborhoods. And that's great because over 500 insects look to oak trees for sustenance. She also looked at all of the riparian areas, or the what she's calling natural areas. So the red spots are parklands, and all the yellow is all the border along riparian and on the edges of parks. And she's come to the conclusion that with 627 acres of linear buffer edge habitat that we're in pretty good shape. Her recommendations, when is it good to keep a stag? It's one thing to say we want to keep a stag, but you got to watch, is it in a safe enough area? Or is anyone likely to walk towards that stag for any reason? You got to keep your public safe, but if you can leave it there, we found that bees need that for rest and hibernation. Her second recommendation, plant with diversity in mind. She's got a couple of notes there about oak, maple, and hackberry good as pollinators, and then some mid-story trees as well. Resilience. This guy is just a bachelor's degree student, but he thought he was writing a master's thesis on resilience. He did a great job, and he found that, so what's happening here, What the green color here is in Michigan, and we're studying Celtis occidentalis hackberry. And the Forest Service is projecting out to the year 2050 and saying what's still viable. And so this green patch over Michigan, this is an area where they could actually see enhanced opportunity for hackberry. But down where we're at in these red sections of Des Moines, it's going to be a diminishing hackberry habitat. And then north of us in the yellow area will be a mixture of the two. They'll have some opportunity to grow or to reseed. So he did a great job. It's a great chapter. You'll enjoy reading it. His recommendations, diverse species. He's a little anxious about planting vulnerable species such as maple and pine, and should also reduce plantings of hackberry and bur oak. He says get that cyclical pruning program in gear right away. Chapter 10 is big trees. We all know that it's obvious. The bigger the tree, the more benefits you got. So I'll move right into recommendations. Again, invest in maintenance, and let's get a proactive treatment program for disease and insects. And I got to tell you, you're already thinking of it for some of the things we've mentioned. These things come with a price tag. We currently don't have any proactive treatment programs, whether for prevention or treatment of existing diseases or insects. They cost money. That's why we haven't done it, but it's stuff we got to get around to doing, because we've got to get more older trees in the city. You only do that by taking care of the ones you got. Chapter 11, Insects, Disease, and Invasives, written by Emma Hannigan, our DNR Urban Forestry Coordinator. Nice, wonderful technical chapter. Recommendations, ramp up efforts to replace the ash, and plant for diversity to defend against future losses. Now comes the middle of the Urban Forest Master Plan, our wonderful sustainability report card. And over here, so are you seeing my cursor? Yeah, thank you, Carolyn, for nodding. So on the left column, you've got all the indicators of a sustainable forest, and under here are the different categories. Beside the indicators, you have the objectives or industry standards that would help you achieve that. And then you've got these three columns. Are you either performing at a low, moderate, or a good level? And so for this first example, the urban tree canopy, we're only scoring ourselves moderate, 29% tree canopy with 91% of the trees in fair to excellent condition. That's really good, except we want it to be a 32% tree canopy. So that's why we scored ourselves where we did. There are 24 categories in total. 17 are good or green. Only 5 are yellow, and then only 2 are red. So I'm going to point out the red ones now under our maintenance category. So this is what we've been lacking for several decades, is this cyclical pruning crew. And the second one score that's low is on the funding category. Trying to move my, funding. So we score ourselves low there because we need to really boost our planting money and also make sure we get these cyclical pruners on staff. So the biggest takeaways then from our report card, and you'll just truly enjoy reading that graphic, is increased funding for planting and the investment in the cyclical pruning. We've got a large landowner chapter. So they tackle these large landowners: DMAC, Drake, Grandview, Des Moines Public Schools. It's not the biggest landowner. Des Moines Waterworks is, but I guess the public schools would be second highest. 2 notable, not emissions, but they were just forgotten or left out, would be the State Fairgrounds and the State Capitol Complex. And we just inked the deal with them finally for us to be in charge of trees on the streets up there. They've been wanting to have total control up there, and it was much to their detriment. Any trees they had that were failing, they never replaced. Recommendations for large landowners is work with them to establish benchmarks. let them increase their canopy by 3% and more to help us with the overall goal of 3%. And then connect them with tree keeper volunteers for their projects. Chapter 14, regional cooperation. Those 17 cities listed up there are all part of the Tomorrow Plan. The lower left graphic are the 12 topics we put out to the urban forestry leaders in each of our communities. No matter what department they were in, somebody's in charge of trees. And we asked them to, apply a strongly agree all the way down to strongly disagree. And you can see the second from the left there, the strongly or agree in all the columns. So we want to keep working together. We've been meeting quarterly. So the recommendations are to pursue that arrangement. And secondly, to rely on Trees Forever to be a neutral convener. Urban wood utilization was written by a DNR district forester. Now his sole job, because he went out and got some grants for the purpose, is to find ways to channel all of our unused removed trees and tree parts from cities and get them into the hands of people that can make something useful out of them and get that carbon stored for longer or much longer. So recommendations, learn from our other communities across the country what they've got going and how do they keep it going. These things cost a little money to get going, but how do you sustain it? And also educate people, ourselves and our populace, about how every tree, even if it's dead or dying, is still a resource. Volunteerism and nonprofits, you all know Trees Forever, they're our main connection. And they say, well, sign up to plant trees and sign up to be an upcycle steward and get invasive plants taken care of. And often they can be actually fed to the zoo animals because they won't spread out from there. Chapter 17, recommended species. It covers a whole bunch of stuff. Hardiness zone, infrastructure conflict, site analysis, etc. Recommendations, select commonly available and appropriate to the site, and also use the changing climate data to make proper planting choices. Chapter 18, students at ISU came up with a game plan, wrote a management plan for us, how to do the planting, how to look after all the hazard trees, how to get a cyclical pruning program underway, top recommendations. I love the way they framed this. Every other chapter we say, make sure you keep your trees longer. They reversed and said, increase the number of healthy, balanced trees by performing effective pruning. Other chapters say, get the pruning program in. These guys lay out there why you're doing it as their top reasons. So good on them. And of course, get those 3,800 trees planted annually. Chapter 19, we did a public opinion survey in 2019. And I will tell you that overwhelmingly, Des Moines residents who responded to this random survey across all neighborhoods expressed appreciation for their trees, and many want to be involved with any improvements we hope to make. Recommendations, this is a good one. Work with the neighborhood. Some of them don't have neighborhood plans yet, much less a tree plan, but work with them, and it might, who has a neighborhood plan now, get them to include tree canopy goals and help them achieve that. And then here's a big one, seek creative solutions to the needs of seniors and residents with disabilities who may need help with tree maintenance and litter disposal. I could talk a long time about my thoughts and feelings on that. There's got to be a way to help people help us. If we want them to help us to build our canopy, sometimes they're going to need our help to achieve that end. This is very germane to society today, environmental equity. A wonderful ISU forestry student set out to see if if we were meeting the not so good statistic, which is a national statistic. Do we have more trees in white neighborhoods? Unfortunately, Waterbury and Salisbury Oaks, the whitest neighborhoods in the city, have the highest tree canopy. And another similar graph, This one's a little backwards for reading. Here's your lowest income neighborhoods. And again, your whitest neighborhoods happen to be the highest income neighborhoods, and they again have the most trees. She does not draw cause and effect here. She's just stating what is. There are other potential reasons besides outright racism, but or classism, but it's something we can fix. So here's recommendations: increase tree planting in low to middle income areas, and increase maintenance in the same areas. So everybody's on an even playing ground. I'm not going to explain urban heat island because you guys are so very much there with your knowledge. The student did find in his study, he found that Beaverdale and Drake, which had higher tree canopies, had lower hottest temperatures over a 3-year period, whereas Waveland Woods and Ingersoll Park, which had less percentage tree canopy, had higher high temperatures over 3 years. He recommended strategically planting over gray, and this is a great one. Create ways to get trees into the hands of property owners. We're going to do just that. We're going to come up with a program similar to what was happening on Capitol Hill. In this case, it won't be sponsored by Mid-American or some power company. Their money's dried up, by the way, for that kind of stuff. We'll invest in the program because if we take a $100 tree and we pay for $70, we get 500 in the ground. That's an investment of $35,000. They'll pay the extra 30. So investors always take care of trees to a higher degree. So we're getting a good return on our buck there. Residential energy use. We had a great study there by professors at ISU. You'll love that chapter, by the way. But the recommendations: increase planting of street trees, also educate residents to plant trees to reduce home and business energy bills. By the way, and it's said right on the cover, the print cover, we've got 3 categories of work we do. We do planting, we do maintenance, and we do education. So most recommendations fit in one of those 3 categories. So education is a lot of what we need to do. Societal effects of trees. This is a catch-all chapter that dealt with things that weren't covered elsewhere, like they studied asthma characteristics from Iowa Department of Health. And so physical and mental health. So recommendations: provide education to healthcare providers on the physical and mental health benefits of trees, and also to builders and realtors, because there's economic sense to having trees. Chapter 24, I couldn't get anybody else to write it, so I wrote it myself, and I couldn't stop writing. Turns out to be 75 pages long, the biggest chapter. I so very much enjoyed it. Already I found from Kent, there's a piece of information, Sycamore, Grand Avenue used to be called Sycamore Avenue, but this is the value now of having an online urban forest master plan. We can update and add and change as we have new facts to gather. And final lessons learned from history: downtown trees were almost non-existent. Got gorgeous, and the reason I put them in the plan is because I love the pictures of old cars. But in the 50s, whether it's Grand Avenue or Sycamore or Locust, all those gorgeous hunks of metal and 0 trees. So we've made some great strides in terms of getting trees downtown. Also, that residents have the privilege and responsibility to begin their own history of trees. It's not about you and your childhood tree anymore. Start thinking about your children, your grandchildren, and start creating history around trees. And finally, chapter 25, and we're positing here that if you do all the stuff, starting in 2021, if we increase budget and plant 3,800 trees annually and get that cyclical pruning program in gear, that by 2045, we will have a 32% tree canopy cover. It will be a sustainable forestry program. We will have trees in 98% fair to excellent condition. It'll be equitable. We'll have arborist apprenticeships, reduction in urban heat island. All this good stuff's going to happen if we make this. So this is one of those deals where you say you make you plan to work and then you work the plan. So if we work the plan, all that good stuff's going to happen to us. And right now I'll say, whew, I got through it all for you. I don't know how many minutes, but I was working to get done in 20.
Well, thank you, David. That was wonderful. Carrie, are you going to check the questions in the chat?
Yeah, so we have a couple of them. Whoops, my thing just went away. There we go. So we have a couple of them. So the first one I'm just going to put in here is from Allison, who is on the phone. And actually, I've got one from Allison, one from Dan, and one from comment from Kent. So Allison, if you want to unmute and just go ahead and ask your question, that's okay.
I'll give it a try. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, David. I'm just wondering how often you'll update the tree inventory going forward.
Great question. So we have a live inventory. The goal, and we're probably hitting it with 80% success, very much less so during emergency storms like the current one. But the goal is to have every time one of our forestry staff touches a tree, removes a tree, plants a tree, looks at a tree, that a record is made. They have iPads in the field with them. It's supposed to be a live and perpetually updated inventory. Now, having said that, there's always gaps. There's even gaps from the original inventory where they misidentified trees or missed trees, etc. So the plan is hopefully that on a 5-year cycle, just have a survey group in the summers, could be students, just renew 1/5 of the plan, just so it's always up to date. Barring that, then every 5 years we'll have to just hire a new inventory done.
Great. And Dan Werfel, you had a question in the chat also. Did you want to ask your question?
Sure. I guess they were, I had two there. One was, how did Plan DSM / the city zoning support or hinder the goals of the master plan? And then once new young trees are planted, how's the contribution to future canopy calculated?
Remember your question. Remember the second one in particular.
Okay.
I can't speak to the Plan DSM so much as I know what was in the Tomorrow Plan. That was in the making when I arrived here in 2011. So it's 9 years, Carol, and not 11.
Okay.
But having said that, there wasn't a single reference to trees in the Tomorrow Plan. And I got a hold of Pat Bodie and I said, why not? She says, well, you put them in the language and send them to me and I'll ensure they're there. So there's at least 3 places now where the word tree or trees pops up. They thought to put in, because of their regional influence, they thought to put in our nonprofit Trees Forever and things they would do, but they hadn't discussed the actual concept of trees. And so things like needing an inventory and budget for trees. What was your second question?
So you were talking about when people, plant trees either residentially or contribute to canopy. How do you calculate canopy potential canopy based on young trees?
I'm not privy to the numbers on that. The DNR, who are skilled not only in what they do by themselves, but this is being done nationally. So the U.S. Forest Service would help them do that. How do we know we have, how did we even know that we had, in 2009, that we had 27% canopy? It's because they did a LiDAR study. And at the University of Vermont, they compiled all the data and said, you've got 27%. Well, by 2015 or thereabouts, it had moved to 29. And I asked our urban forestry coordinator, how come if we're planting less that we've actually got more canopy? And she wisely thought it could be because you've assumed more land, and that's exactly the case. We had taken in some areas north and also south. And so if you're assuming control of rural areas that got a lot more trees, then you're adding canopy. So anyway, back to your question, the DNR has done the math for us. So they're the ones who say that we need to plant 3,800 trees. And just hearing that, you gulp, as a city forester. We're only planting 500 to 700. How are we going to do this? Well, we got to start applying ourselves and be creative. And And so one way we can do that is by getting them cheaply into the hands of the property owner, the private property owner, because even though it's not quote unquote a city tree, it will count towards the canopy. And the bigger goal, of course, is canopy, so that the entire city is more covered by trees. Did I get your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions that people have?
I have a question. Noting that the survey of citizens was very positive about trees and trying to figure out how to fund trees, what about the idea of a GoFundMe to say, take an area of the city that really needs trees and do a GoFundMe, plus have those people volunteer to come out and plant them? Some kind of, besides Trees Forever. I know Trees Forever does that, and the tree keepers are part, but what about just the ordinary citizens do a GoFundMe and then plant those trees?
Yes, I love the idea. There's one problem I got to tell you right away. Most requests we get are from people who are more white and more rich. So the challenge becomes, how do you get trees onto property or adjacent to their properties when trees are not even on their mind? And so we've got to do a lot of education in certain of our communities and let them be the ones to come up with the idea that, hey, we need trees too. How can we put it together? That's the place then where we could use that GoFundMe. If we simply announce that we're going to do a GoFundMe somewhere, all the richer or whiter communities are going to say, pick me first.
Yeah.
And that's a sad fact.
Yeah.
It's not sad that they're asking, it's sad that others aren't, is my point. And so we've got a big job ahead of us to educate the total value of trees to you as a person, to your family, to your energy bill, to your future health, if there are any asthma or other breathing problems in your family. There's just a host of benefits that they may not realize are there by the simple act of planting a tree. Thanks for the idea on a GoFundMe, Carolyn.
Mhm.
David, that arborist training program could provide jobs for people. And, other cities have created job training programs from adding green infrastructure, whether it's doing pervious paving in alleys or there's a variety of things like that. I'm the current chair of our Climate Reality Des Moines chapter, and a guy from the National Wildlife Foundation and I have kind of made it our mission to reach out and connect to the Black Lives Matter group. I've talked to Sheila about this, to do some mentoring and education, and just expose them to the information sources that we've all had. And then I think this GoFundMe campaign could work via neighborhood associations that could actually administer it. But once again, I think, we're all concerned about social and environmental justice, and more and more and more. And, these things are related to health and wellness, as well as the health of our whole ecosystem. The city wants to replace the sponge in our urban watersheds because of the high rain events that we're having now because of climate change. So there's a lot of opportunity, but you're right. It always comes down to funding, and Des Moines is always cash strapped, it seems.
Yeah.
Kent, the name of your organization that you chair again?
Climate Reality.
Reality? Climate
Reality Project. If you Google it, there's a robust website. It's a 3-day training that I did in Cedar Rapids in 2015.
Thank you, Kent. You remind me to tell you something important if I didn't mention it already. We've had environmental equity in mind for years. I had it in mind from Pittsburgh. We have in Pittsburgh, this is PA, there's probably other Pittsburghs, but in Pittsburgh, PA, we had, I suppose, between 30 and 50% Black population. So entirely different context when I came here, but I knew it was just as important here. And now we find out about the history of redlining and all that leads to where we're at today. So I did want to tell you this very important thing. When we partnered with Trees Forever to be our prime tree planting agency, we committed together to the concept that they were going to hire youth from underserved demographics. And so this year, out of a group of 10, they would have had 7 Black youth and 1 or 2 Hispanic, and I think maybe an Asian, and they recycled them to another group of 10. I think they had over the course of the summer, maybe 40 different youth employees, and then some college level, and one of those gals was Black. She was one of the co-authors of our public survey from ISU. So we are making inroads into being equitable in our well, first of all, in our approach to this whole issue of building our tree canopy. We're trying to be equitable in the outworking of that. We're using underserved populations to plant the trees, and then high on their target list is finding areas that are lesser served to plant the trees in. The problem's always going to be, and we'll find a way to deal with it as we get more money generally for planting. The problem always is we get wound up in projects because some whiter, richer person has requested, and they may even help fund it. So that's where your energies go. So if we can get the planting budget we're looking for, we're going to resolve a lot of this, because then we'll have more to be equitable with. Thank you for your input, Kent.
We have time for one more question, and Sheila, you had a couple questions in the chat, so we'll go to you, and then we need to wrap this up.
Sure. Well, I guess one of the things that comes to mind for me is, we've been working on the whole energy and water benchmarking ordinance that we got implemented last year, and now it's come up again. We want to add some things to it. And part of that discussion revolves around multifamily residential complexes. And to me, it seems like that would be a great place to be planting a lot of trees, because you have the space, one, and also because renters tend to be our more socioeconomic, vulnerable parts of our communities. And I don't know if there's a way to tie that in. I don't know if maybe it needs to become part of the Sustainable Development Code, that they have to have a higher percentage of trees, or there has to be an annual planting and maintenance routine. So I was just kind of interested in your thoughts on that. And then I'm also interested if you are familiar with studies that were done in Sweden involving biochar and urban trees, and just how that seemed to really allow the trees that we see encased in concrete to survive and thrive, and if there's been any thoughts about that here for Des Moines.
It would be nice if biochar would actually eat concrete. That way you could reduce the amount of concrete.
Right?
Increase the root. Great question, Sheila. I'll start with the second first, because biochar is an easy one. There's already been a study group and a group that came to our city offices, and they actually went to our mulch pile to see if our stuff was of character that they could use to burn down with zero oxygen and turn it into biochar. It's got great promise. We have some test sites out now that we'll be keeping an eye on. But yeah, all the reports, the early reports, it's a good thing. So where we used to do a little fertilizer, which we don't do anymore, where we used to do mycorrhizae that we don't do anymore, could be the biochar be the thing to start adding to new plantings. Because it helps to increase soil volume, thereby giving some soil structure. It's not really a food additive, it's a structure builder.
Right.
Thanks for that. The multifamily concept, I kind of like it. You were suggesting that a multifamily unit might have more space to plant trees. As soon as you said it, I thought of the new development that's going south of of MLK at around 15th Street, say between 10th and 15th. Is that new Hubble that's connected to Gray's Lake by the brand new walking bridge?
Okay.
Boy, when those plans came through, I said, where are the trees?
Yeah.
So how that's built, you've got trees on the exterior, but they do their parking on the interior. So when you get out of your car, you're either looking at your building or you're across the driveway building, and they've got zero room for trees in there. I thought, how did we come to this? The council and our community development department have been working so very hard to plant as many trees as we can. Now here's the type of development that actually restricts the space for trees. And so
And
this
that's a
is what I
floodplain.
watch out for.
And that's the floodplain area too, isn't it? I mean, that should have more trees than
Yes.
other
That's-
areas.
Planning and
Oh,
development
yeah.
should never have allowed that.
Floodplain, I guess, is by potential. Everyone's hope is that the levee will keep everyone dry, but you're correct. It is a floodplain, just like waterworks to the west of it.
Yeah.
I think we need to move on to the last question on the agenda because we have some updating to do tonight also. It is, and David, maybe you can start us out, is what do we need to do to ensure the adoption of the master plan for the trees? What could we do?
Number one thing I'd like you to do, Caroline and task force members, is I'm not going to release this color print version anyway. That's under wraps. That'll be like a grand exposure. But I am releasing to you the fuller content of the full chapters. And I've released the first 11 to you. I stopped there because after that comes the report card in the middle that I realized I need to doctor a little bit to make it agree now with the print version that we've been working so hard for. But I've got 11 chapters in front of them. Number one thing you do is read and be informed about what it is exactly we're proposing, because I don't want you to, whether it's come to a council or write a letter, say we support and not know exactly what it is you're supporting. So I covet your earnest reading. As to what you can do, we'll have a rollout of the master plan. And what that means, we'll announce a date that'll go before city council. So we hopefully have media there. And so one thing you can do is invite media to the same event because of your keen interest in the outcome. Having the media, so then we present to council. You can also speak up at a council meeting and say, we support the urban forest plan in its totality or most of it, or whatever it is you want to say. And I know you all know the value of trees, so you'll be wonderful spokespersons. You've also got a history now. You've had a couple of years as a task force. You've managed to get yourself a city employee now to help out with the cause, and good for you all. That's what I think of so far. If I think of any other angle on which it'd probably be a media thing, Caroline. If you guys agree with something, even before, whether it's before or after a council session, you just simply ask for a media interview and say what you agree with about this plan, how wonderful it's going to be.
Do we know when it's going to come up to the council?
So I'm probably, it won't be within 1 month. I'm still a couple of weeks out from getting that print version completely ready. It's in the hands of my communications person.
So you're thinking October timeframe?
Yes, yes. And before Caroline asked me how long I'm going to be around, my director put the thumb on me to be a spokesperson about a legal case concerning trees and a trip hazard for middle of October. So I know I'm here at least that long. But I'm going to be here to roll this out, and then I'll start talking with my employers. I don't want to be a full-time the guy responsible anymore, but if I can help you achieve some of the short and medium goals of this master plan, let's start talking about it. I turned 70 in May, so I should have been retired a few years back. But this is good news for me, for you, for the city. I love what I do because I work for a good cause.
Hey, Sheila, can you put the question in the chat to David? Because we do have to move on to Jeremy and Dan.
I'm just wondering if we could get the PowerPoint to put on our Facebook page.
This PowerPoint?
Yeah, the one that you showed us today.
Yep.
Okay.
I am also recording this.
Mhm.
So my PowerPoints come with full notes. So if I'll transmit it maybe with a large file transfer so that you can get the full.
Allison takes all these recordings and puts them on the website so we could share the link.
Right.
Yeah, I understand that. So we've already got some short addresses. It starts city.dsm, then urban forest plan, and then the other one says urban forest chapters. So the plan will be the color version that will have some hundreds of print version that I'll give to you folks, but then the other part will be online as well. I better sign off, or Caroline's going to have my neck.
I think it would also be good, David, because of your clout as the city forester, to do a nice op-ed right before the rollout on the master plan. And I mean, the things you've said in an op-ed would be marvelous.
That idea dovetails with one my director had, which was to memorialize the process. Where did we begin? What did we go through to get this master plan written? In other words, take a historical point of view until kaboom, it gets laid out for people. I'm thinking video and all kinds of wonderful stuff.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, let's
Okay.
move
Can
to
I sign off then?
Yeah, thank you so much, David.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks.
thank you for the
David.
invitation. You're all wonderful people. You're all doing a great job. I appreciate you, and you all keep up the good work, and that'll keep me going too. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, David.
Bye, David.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Let me send that along.
Quickly, and then we'll move to Josh and Rayhan and Katie real quick. So
Right.
Jeremy and Dan, you've got the floor.
Great,
Jeremy,
thank you.
I'm gonna let you take it, man.
All right. So I appreciate everyone's efforts over the last couple of weeks to help outreach to your city councilors and to the rest of the sustainability task force group and others who are interested in the benchmarking ordinance across the city. I think a lot of your outreach helped smooth the process along this week at the city council meeting. So the second reading was voted through on the consent agenda on a 5-2 vote with Westergaard and Gatto as the no votes on that. And it'll be up for a third and final reading at the next city council meeting, as far as I understand. And so hopefully it'll move through as smoothly as it did this week when it comes up again. But I would certainly suggest that you have some folks on the call to speak to the benefits of the benchmarking ordinance again when that next city council meeting call happens. I think Dan put together some great talking points that he sent around, and if those could get distributed more broadly, I think that would certainly help out a lot. And Dan, I don't know if you wanted to touch base on those real quick. And we also have Josh on, Councilman Mendelbaum on here as well. So if there's anything he would like to add, I'd certainly like to open it up to him as well.
Josh, if you're there, you can go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm here. I mean, I appreciate everyone continuing to advocate for the benchmarking ordinance. I don't know how much of updates you've got, but I mean, Jeremy, I think we're at 60% or a little over in terms of compliance, which is a pretty good number, particularly for the first year of a program. We've obviously got a ways to go, and we've still got property owners who are skeptical of the program, to say the least, and have been trying to undo our good work. It's unfortunate that we had to, this was really just an oversight. It doesn't change the program. It just allows us to actually collect the administrative fee that we already put in place in the program. So it should have just been a pretty smooth process, but it's ended up, we've been using it as an opportunity to do some education on the program and its benefits. And we'll keep it going. And I'll share one positive and maybe something that you guys can all help with positive reinforcement. So I don't know if you noticed, but at the first meeting where we discussed this, Councilwoman Westergaard said that we should be focused on homeowners. She might have been describing homes like mine, because she was pretty specific in a description of a home. And my home had maybe previously come up in this discussion. But my response to that was to provide information on how we could actually do things to help homeowners on the efficiency front. And at our last meeting, we received and filed a report by the American Council on an Energy Efficient Economy on real estate listings, but also a news article on what Minneapolis is looking at related to the launching a pay-as-you-go or pay-as-you-save financing program. And this week, Councilwoman Westergaard emailed staff saying that she'd like us to look at doing something along pays or some sort of financing program to help homeowners implement energy efficiency. So that to me is a positive, and it allowed us to raise an issue and engage on that, and maybe. So we're going to now start having some conversations on how we can launch or look at financing to do some work with homeowners on efficiency. So as frustrating as this has been, there's still positives that can come out of it.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's huge. That's
Yeah,
great.
when Linda was talking, I'm like, I don't understand why this can't be a yes and situation, about residential stuff. And I'm glad that she thought that she ended up thinking the same way. I did create a list of like points to address, as somebody who works in affordable housing and hearing in affordable housing against benchmarking, it was a little frustrating. One of the points that I made is that basically people who are living in affordable housing in buildings that are inefficient could be subsidizing that building's energy by paying an energy bill that they can't afford for inefficiencies in the building's ability to deliver electricity or water. So that's something to think about. There are a bunch of different points in there. One of the things that Kent's white sheet pointed out is it would be interesting to see the cross-section of benchmarking and building efficiency and affordable housing, and see if the affordable housing that's being provided is actually providing a quality, HVAC, heating, air conditioning system for the folks that have access to that. And so that's just one really good way we can use the data. But if you're interested in receiving some of those talking points, if you want to just put your email in the chat, I can send them along.
Dan, would it make sense if we just sent it out to everybody on the task force list and encourage people to also look at those points, and then also send thank you letters or emails to the council people who voted in favor of it, and encourage the other two to reconsider their position?
I don't see why not. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I think anything we can do to kind of keep the issue in their forebrain. I like the idea of sending them thank yous. You know, they don't get enough positive reinforcement. So,
One surprise that I got is that Des Moines are already rated for 55 Energy Star certified buildings. And I think they're probably mostly public buildings, like city buildings and schools and stuff.
I think those are almost all the schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just for the schools that we have, we're in the top 3 mid-sized cities and in the top 25 for the entire United States.
And there are a number of buildings that are being submitted that are privately owned properties through the benchmarking ordinance that will qualify for an Energy Star score, and will even boost those numbers further.
And one of my other points is that, you know, with Jeremy's comment there is we could quickly become a leader in Energy Star certified buildings depending on how a lot of this pans out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to touch base real quick before we move on to the 24/7 carbon neutrality discussion, we're at 62% compliance at this point with 354 submissions received, and I am working feverishly to help a dozen or a couple dozen folks that have reached out to me for assistance in submitting their properties, but there are certainly several others that are coming through on their own as we get closer to that deadline of the 28th of August. So as that creeps up, I think we'll see another influx of submissions, and hopefully that will continue to boost the numbers.
Jeremy, thank you so much for all your work. And Dan, thank you for putting together talking points and scrambling so much last week. And Josh, obviously, thank you for your vote. Anything else real quick on this? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next piece.
I just wanted to, something that occurred to me is, you know, we had talked about this before, and we've never really taken the time for the city to acknowledge the school's efforts in their energy efficiency, and you know, maybe that might be a PR point to bring forward again. So anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I can talk through that with administration staff on our side. They are administered separately to a certain degree from the city, so a lot of their outreach and communications comes from the schools themselves, but I can certainly bring that topic up for discussion. And I know there's the same to be said for a lot of the city facilities that we do manage have had significant efficiency upgrades over the past several years, utilizing some of Mid-American's rebate programs as well as some other projects. And so those haven't been highlighted either. So I think there's a great opportunity here to continue to tell some more stories that haven't been told.
Right. I just really like to go ahead.
Jeremy, school buildings are not covered under the ordinance. Is that right?
That's correct.
Unfortunately, you know, that was something that I didn't see why not, since Des Moines Public Schools is a leader in this area. And again, they could be acknowledged, but that was something that there was some pushback.
Unfortunately, I don't have the institutional knowledge behind what happened with all of that, but I can certainly look into it a little bit further and report back on that at one of the next meetings.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. So let's go ahead and move on to talk about the 100% renewable ordinance. So Josh is here to give us an update, and then we have some other folks here, Rayhan, Katie, Kristen, to also help us talk about like what are some, you know, to think through some strategy ideas of how we can really support this ordinance. So Josh, go ahead and take it away. Hope you're muted if you're
sure. Can you hear me?
Mhm,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know that there's a ton to update. You know, we've been working on language. I think the update's really more going to be on the grassroots side from some of the colleague organizations, Sierra Club and Iowa Environmental Council in their work. I think the goal is to have this in front of the council looking in the October timeframe, which gives us time to start communicating and building support for it. But I think we've flushed it out. I've been getting input from a variety of folks on language tweaks, and I'm sure there will be more. You know, one of the things that I would encourage, and I think others will talk about, the grassroots push can be and maybe should be stronger than where we'll ultimately end up. So keep that piece in mind. But I think we're on track, and it's just we've got to. I'm gonna be having conversations sort of behind the scenes with some of my fellow council members who are most amenable to this, and we've just got work to do on it.
Can you someone give us updates on who might be opposed to this? Maybe, you know, who might not like this idea, or where pushback is going to come from.
You mean on the council?
Council and otherwise.
Well, I mean, our utility is likely to have objection to this because they don't. It will take away some flexibility and put some pressure on them. So I expect Mid-American to have some concern. In terms of the council, for those of you who watched the benchmarking debate, that'll give you a flavor of where there may be more likely to be opposition. You know, Westergaard and Gatto are tougher votes on issues like this. I was a little surprised where Voss, Councilmember Voss, ended up on the benchmarking. That was the first time he had a chance to deal with it, and so that maybe makes him a little bit more of a wild card on something like this. I think the grassroots work will be really important for Councilmember Gray, and I think the mayor and Councilmember Bozen are likely to be strong supporters. So that's my initial read from conversations I've had and just my sense of the council.
All right, thanks, Josh. So Rayhan, Katie, and Kristen, do you guys want to talk a little bit about where you see strategy or what things you're doing that you think also makes sense for the task force?
Sure, I'll go first unless Kristen or Rayhan object. Okay. Okay. I'll be short though, because I think IEC's 100% Iowa team is really stepping up in a big way on this effort. And we're just trying to choose a complementary suite of tools and staff to work together on this campaign. So we are trying to figure out how we can sort of brand this push. And it's important to us that this task force is also front and center as we do this, to lift up the work that you all are doing as volunteers. That's really important. And to also, you know, give a face to how this goal is practical and achievable, because we have a group like this task force that's on hand to work with city staff and implement these big goals. I'll just say from the Sierra Club side, what we're offering is we have currently a petition that's been online for too long, but we're hoping to deliver it soon, where we're calling on Mid-American to shut down their coal plants. So we're trying to leverage people who have already signed that petition, because they tend to be Mid-Am customers. A lot of them are in Des Moines, to engage them on a campaign, and also see if people who are tuned into this 100% Des Moines campaign would like to join in on our coal plant campaign. But we also, probably our best tool to offer this group is the VAN, the voter database in Iowa of registered voters. And we'll be setting up phone banks where you can call any registered voter, and we can use some of our digital organizing tools to connect people to their council person and voice their support for this language. We've also, since the last time we all spoke, I've been working with Josh and the Sierra Club Ready for 100 staff to get feedback on the language. And they are excited about potentially getting this passed and trying to lift that up in the national media if they can. So, they're really, from what Josh first shared, there were just a couple tweaks, but that they would like to see. They aren't a must-have. A lot of the must-haves to be included as a Ready for 100 city were already there. So it shouldn't take long to adjust those.
Right. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I can jump in and add to that just a little bit, just to talk more about some of our strategy and tactics that we've talked about. So recently the Beyond Coal campaign with Sierra Club launched a good report that talks about the true cost of Mid-American's coal operations, and we're hoping to leverage that as a tool for education going forward. The Iowa Environmental Council is similarly releasing a paper that we're going to hope to time with this campaign that also draws attention to Mid-American Energy's branding, that they have 100% renewable vision, because as many of us know, that's more of a marketing ploy. And we really want to do some education surrounding that talking point. And we think we can catalyze a lot of folks to get involved if we do that. So we're hoping to do some list building over the next month. We're working with a third-party vendor that's targeting some folks that are historically active and want to be involved in projects like this. Currently, we have around 400 folks in the Des Moines area on the IEC side of things that we think would want to take action on this, which is great from the grassroots perspective. And what we want to do is build that out a little bit more and then do a webinar in mid-September just to talk about what 100% renewable ordinance might look like here in Des Moines, and to talk about what some other cities have done. And then we want to, with that event, couple it with a letter writing event virtually. So that's the goal there. And then depending on how that goes, we might host a few more iterations of that leading up to the vote in October. And yeah, so we're coming at it from pretty much the grassroots standpoint and trying to get people to come out in support of this, but we're also going to try to submit a grass tops letter with like-minded organizations that are coming out in support of this. So that's another tactic we're going to employ. And we hope to have unique branding specific to this project so that lots of different groups can share it and get the word out, and it's not tied to one specific organization necessarily. So yeah, with that being said, Rayhan, if you have anything you'd like to add to that I might have missed, please do.
Yeah, so just talking about timeline, the things that Kristen mentioned, and also Josh, hoping to bring this to the October 19th City Council meeting. we're hoping to get that Grass Talks sign-on letter by early October, and also having the informational webinar by mid to end of September, as well as the letter writing campaign. And then another thing that we were thinking about is getting the mayor to sponsor and also move this resolution. So we're reaching out to some organizations, some youth-led groups such as the Des Moines Sunrise and also the Iowa Climate Strike to meet, as well as IEC, to meet with the mayor and kind of talk to him about this resolution and convincing him to sponsor this resolution. So yeah, I think that's all I've got. In case I've missed anything, Katie or Kristen, you guys want to add anything, or if anyone has questions?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from the task force what folks think that the task force should do. I mean, kind of traditionally, we've done presentations with neighborhood associations, outreach, tabling, also did petitions and postcard campaigns and so forth. So I'm wondering what task force members think, how we can plug into this.
Well, it sort of feels like the only avenue left is anything that's happening that's virtual. And so that makes me think of our neighborhood association meetings. We need to make sure that we get this on the agenda of all of those. What else have we got coming up? You said this is going to be on the October 29th council meeting agenda?
19th.
19th. So that gives us 2 months. What other things are coming up in the next 2 months where we can talk to people about this as well? Any, like,
Well, I think it's really important to get the many of the organizations that we have got on board before, environmental organizations on board with, like the Iowa Environmental Council is doing, to join the webinars for the letter writing and for introducing the ordinance. So I think there could be a lot of coordinating between. It's going to take a little work, but we're talking Interfaith Green Coalition, Sierra Club, the Drake Environmental Group. I mean, getting everybody, a real coalition building is probably one of the things we can really do.
Yeah. So I have oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, that's why we're hoping to have campaign-specific branding, just so it is easy for everyone to share. And I know the task force is made up of a diverse group with a lot of folks that are plugged into the sustainability world in one way or another. So if you guys wanted to, leverage those relationships to share that to your base, the more we can get that message out. And I just want to address the timeline really quick. We're aware that this seems a little fast, but we're actually thinking that is going to work to our advantage in this situation. We don't want Mid-American to be able to have, a campaign against this. We don't want them to have too much time to catch wind of it and get organized. So that was strategically done. Just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Yeah. And I have a question. And Rayhan, you mentioned that one of the things you guys were looking at doing was getting the mayor to sponsor the resolution. And I'm just wondering, I know, Josh, this has been something you've been talking about for a while. I'm just wondering, is that a tactical move? Is there what? I'd be curious to hear what the thoughts are behind that.
Sorry, was that, yeah. Was that addressed to Josh? Or?
To you, well, you were the one that brought it up, so you were Josh or whoever.
Yeah, so that was one of our, sorry, my neighbor has this really loud music. I'm sorry if that is interrupting. Yeah, so that was one of the things we discussed internally with an IEC yesterday, thinking that, you know, the mayor is a huge, you know, climate advocate and wants to be a champion of climate action. So we're thinking, you know, this would be something that he would like to champion and, you know, kind of move the resolution. I'm also interested in hearing what Josh's thoughts are on this.
Well, I think it's important that the mayor feels like he has ownership over this. So I think that outreach makes a lot of sense. And yeah, there's no one way that this has to be done. So, and a key piece is making sure that the mayor feels sufficiently invested so that this happens. Because if he doesn't feel invested, it can just lead to challenges down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are looking into setting up a meeting with him and hopefully bringing in some other voices just to loop him in so he does feel that level of investment, and kind of just framing it as something that could be part of his legacy here in Des Moines, because we definitely want to leverage his interest and his passion here, but also put pressure on him so that this thing can really take shape.
Yeah, I know there's probably a few task force members who would love to be part of that meeting.
It also is a great idea to get the Sunrise youth and the Iowa Climate Strike. We had the head of that speak to the Interfaith Green Coalition. They changed their name to the Youth Alliance for People's Justice. They were formerly the Iowa Climate Strike, but it really is amazing when we brought youth to the city council or to the mayor, how much more leverage we had. So bringing the youth in is really important.
Yeah, that's a good consideration. Sorry, we had definitely discussed the Sunrise Movement's involvement in that and had heard similar feedback. So thanks.
I also, just as kind of a side note on that, I know when we had the webinar the last time that, you know, featured you guys and Josh talking about this, we also talked, one of the ideas was to talk about, you know, if we could get some of the other communities in the area to think about this. And there is, so we did talk, I have talked with Urbandale and Johnston a little bit. Is Ginger still on or did she hop off? I don't see her. Because there's a pretty strong group of youth in Johnston that is working on this, and they just presented to their council about wanting the council to move forward with the greenhouse gas emissions inventory and then starting the process of doing a climate action plan. And they formally formed a climate committee that has 2 city council members that are participating in that. So anyway, so there's quite a few youth there that I think as a next location is to potentially look at Johnston as well. Anything else related to this? Any other questions, thoughts about how to move it forward? I think task force members, let's kind of stay in touch with IAC and Sierra Club. But I think we need to probably just do a little call to kind of lay out our action steps pretty quick and then coordinate with you guys so that we're not at cross purposes, but that we're working together, that we're not trying to do the same, you know, outreach to the same groups and stuff. I think that's good.
I do think we need to look, you remember our speaker, David Yan, said he may be putting forth the master tree plan in October, that we don't do it, that he knows when this is going on, so they're not happening the same council meeting.
Do you think that would be a problem if they were at the same council meeting, Josh or Jeremy?
Yeah.
No, I think they'd be fine at the same council meeting. I mean, it might, in terms of if you're trying to generate, I guess, separate press for the tree plan, it might get overshadowed a little. But I don't think there's a problem having these both at the same time.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
I was going to say it might actually be helpful because we can mobilize people and message two different things at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
And that way we don't have to try to get like groups of people to different sets of council meetings, like logistically, whether it probably won't be in person by then, it'll probably still be online, but the time commitment's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Carolyn, you want to wrap it?
Yeah, Jeremy, you want to tell us about our next meeting? Tell people about it.
Yeah, so I spoke with the folks at the city Civil and Human Rights Office today and worked on finalizing plans for the next meeting on September 2nd. So we're planning to have them present on equity and inclusion and specifically how to consider equity and inclusion as part of a climate adaptation and climate planning effort. And so they'll be putting together some materials on that over the next several weeks. They did have a conflict in their schedule that they're working on moving around, and so hopefully taken care of, but they don't foresee that being an issue. And you know, I think it'll be more of a equity and inclusion 101 with some topics tied into the climate action planning process, because I think there's a lot of different levels of experience with those issues on the task force and probably some of the audience that will tune in for that presentation.
What was the date of that meeting again, Jeremy?
September 2nd, I believe.
Okay.
Is that correct, Carolyn?
Yeah, September 2nd. Also, Jeremy, do you know the date of the third council meeting for the benchmark ordinance amendment vote?
I do not know that yet. Let me look real quick. I can probably figure that out.
While you're looking, I have a question real quick. Was putting it in the consent agenda, was that on purpose? Do you know?
I'm not in charge of putting that stuff on the schedule, so.
It was great. It was great, but
Yeah.
It makes it a lot smoother, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly helps
Because
smooth the
staff has already
process over,
recommended
so.
Council often goes along with it. It should be the 31st, shouldn't it? 2 weeks from the 17th.
Yeah, I think that's when it is. So upcoming meetings on the city's council website say September 14th is the next council meeting. So it'll probably be on that agenda.
Hey, one other question, Jeremy, while we have you. Were you at the workshop today?
I was not at the workshop today, no.
Okay, I was wondering what happened with the discussion on the topsoil ordinance.
Yeah, I can get an update for you and shoot an email over to the task force with some details on that. Unfortunately, I'm buried in the
Yeah.
benchmarking world right now, trying to get as many submissions as possible before the deadline.
Providing lots of hand-holding.
Yes.
Good for you. For the 100% renewable campaign, folks, thanks for all the great work you're doing and the collaboration that you're trying to foster here. Have you reached out to Black Lives Matter?
Not yet. However, that is the plan. We're currently compiling, Des Moines organizations that would, be in support of this ordinance or resolution. So that is definitely in our list.
I'm sure you've got some good data on air quality impacts and how
Sorry, Ken, I think you're muted.
you've probably got information on the urban air quality issues here and how those often disproportionately affect minority populations that already have pre-existing conditions for asthma or other lung issues. So this is a real racial justice issue. You can frame it that way.
Definitely. And we are looking to add that to the ordinance itself, just to talk about the equity and disproportionate impact piece and actually state that in the resolution so that it's clear and understood by all.
Great, thank you.
Any other announcements, comments?
Thanks, everybody. I got to
Carolyn?
I just noticed that the 2nd is a Wednesday. So is that not an official city council meeting, but like a workshop?
No, the 2nd is our next meeting. The council meeting isn't until the 14th.
So the one that Jeremy was talking about with the Civil and Human Rights Commission, he said September 2nd. That's a Wednesday.
Yeah, we always do our meetings on Wednesdays.
Oh, they're doing it with us here at our task force. Okay, I thought they were presenting the city council. Sorry.
Nope.
Thanks for everybody joining us. We have a lot of work ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rehan and Kristen. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Katie and Rehan and Kristen. Great.
Great work. Thank you.
Good invitation.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Time to go watch the convention. Woot woot!